So I would say that post-corona is a process. It's something that starts now, somewhere now, like we'll just come back to it in a moment. But it's a process of getting from the crisis to reaching our goals. And the difference is that it's like this process is just a bit different than we imagined before the corona crisis, but it's a process. So it's a set of steps that we need to take to be able to really function in this kind of like new reality, the new normal as we call it. And it usually starts at different moments for different companies, for different businesses, for different people as well. Because for some, it might start with lifting some restrictions. You know, like when we think of hairdressers, for instance, like for a lot of them, post-corona starts in the moment when they can reopen like their place and they can start having customers. For someone else, well, if you are able to move completely work remotely and almost nothing happens, when does post-corona start for you? In some cases, I can tell you that for me personally, post-corona will start when my kid will go back to school. Like that will be the biggest moment. But it's a process, and it will have different steps on the way. Another important step might be when we can remove the masks and not wear them anymore, and so on. So in all this process, when we get from one side to another, for internal comms, there are different challenges and opportunities, and this is what we want to talk about. You know, like what you can, what it makes sense to have a look at during the time, what it makes sense to like put your hands on during that time, and what are the opportunities that the time actually gives us, and how we can use them. And why us? Zuzka will tell you why we want to talk about it.
Okay, so thank you for the introduction to the topic. I will maybe for a second jump back to who we are as Inko Club and who we are as people. And as Diana said, why we want to talk about internal comms and internal comms in post-corona. So to introduce Inko Club, we are a very young community, let's say, of internal comms friends. And Inko Club was created based on our own need because we were missing some community related to internal comms here in Czech Republic. So we are Czech-based, but we are open to the entire world, which proves, as we have people from Poland and UK already here today, so welcome to you as well. And our main aim is to network, to share knowledge, experience, and get to know each other in the field of internal comms so that we can like learn and grow together. We have a Facebook page, we have LinkedIn, we will talk about that more as well at the end of the presentation, but we will be happy if you join us and if you become a part of this community. And who we are as people. So I will start since I'm already talking. I'm a professional in the field of external and internal comms for about the past 11 years. I started as a journalist writing for several newspapers and also as a reporter for the Czech national TV. Then I moved to PR and content. I worked with Janken Rubikam in communications, Batya at the BMW and others. And for about the past 7 years, I have been focused on internal comms. As an internal employee as well as a consultant, external consultant, I worked with AVG, which is Avast today. I worked with MSD Embedded, which is part of the PPF group. And also I had the pleasure to work with Kiwi for some time. And that's where I got to know and become friends with Diana and some other people that joined today. And I also focus on internal comms as part of my PhD research. So that's me.
Okay, so maybe now a bit about me. So my journey like with communications started actually during studies. Well, I studied French literature and language, but there was also a stream of communications, and we had a chance there to kind of like look in different things, like from journalists through PR and like even some parts of marketing and advertising and internal comms. And I knew that was the area. At that time, because I come from Poland, like in Poland, companies didn't really have internal communications. So I needed to kind of like wait a bit for that area to be available. So my first experiences were rather connected to marketing. But when this opportunity kind of appeared, then I was like gradually moving to internal communication. And I would say that my really, really, really great experience with internal communications was with UBS, where I worked for 7 years and worked cooperated with headquarters in Zurich, but also with core locations and with supporting centers. And that was a really, really great global experience. With very interesting standards, insights, and so on. And then I decided that I would prefer to live in the Czech Republic, so I came here, and I worked in Kyiv as head of internal communications there. But I always had in mind that one day I would like to work more as a consultant, like on the outside, not sitting inside just one company for as many years as I like to. But I would prefer to kind of work with more companies at once, and I would like to share what I already know and learn from other people. So I thought that this way of working will be better. I enjoy it a lot. I started at the beginning of this year, and that's how with Zuzka we decided that we have the capacity to start the Inko Club. So that's how it all happened. And now let's jump into the topic. Okay, but I forgot I need to give Zuzka access. Yeah, so.
Oh, it's still moving.
It works. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, great. So let us jump into the topic and why you are here. I guess I don't think you are here to learn about me and Diana. So
Sorry.
we'll talk now about the actual topic. So let me start by recapping and summarizing the situation, because we believe it's important to give some background and context to the practical tips and things that we will be sharing in the second part. As of today, there are 4.4 million people infected by COVID-19 in the world. There are 300,000 people that died due to this infection. As for the Czech Republic, the whole situation started in March, I would say at the beginning of March. And the only word that can describe the beginning of this is a chaos. As at the beginning, no one knew what was happening, how long it's going to last, whether they should keep the business as usual or whether they should close their offices and close their services, whether they should keep people in their offices or whether they should send them home. That was pretty much decided for them mid-March, as the whole country was quarantined and most of the services had to shut down and reduce their work. So all of the companies, all of the organizations had to launch some kind of crisis scenarios and some kind of crisis comms, no matter if they had it prepared or not. I would compare the situation to the reaction of human body to stress and to some kind of danger. So I would divide the companies or organizations to three groups. Some of them fought So they came up with new ways how to run the business and how to keep going like within hours. So as an example is, for instance, the company Prusha, which provides machines for 3D printing. They switched within hours to printing shields for hospitals and found different ways how to keep running and how to help. Some of the companies started running, so they were kind of hoping that it would last only a couple days, that we would go back to the normal in matter of 1 or 2 weeks. So they started adjusting some things, some little things, but they more tried to run from the whole situation, and some froze. So they completely stopped and were in a panic and couldn't decide which road to take. And now, as the situation has been around for some time, most of the businesses adjusted and are in the situation of resetting the business, are in the situation of thinking about the back to work plan, or already launched some plan because they have people already coming back. And the businesses are kind of counting their losses and defining the new normal. So we will talk about that a bit later. But here in Czech Republic, I would say the situation now is that we are all learning what the new normal will be, or will be looking like. And as for the internal comms, I think that all of the companies are kind of getting from the stage of crisis solving to planning, and also from the one-way communication that in the crisis they had to inform, compared to now where they are looking for ways again how to engage people and how to start the two-way communication. As for the scenarios ahead, well, Corona proved that we never know what can happen and what the future holds. But we believe, or we, in this whole presentation, we work with 2 main scenarios in our mind, and that's one, that it all comes down and we have to figure out how to get from the crisis mode and crisis comes, and switch to this new normal and get back on track and start doing the business, start providing the services. And the second scenario, that based on some experts is an option that we have to take into account, is that there will be a second wave that may come later this year, and it may happen that we will have to again limit some services, limit some businesses, or we have to get back to more social distancing. So in that case, we have to keep in mind how do we tackle this situation if it happens again. What can be repeated from what we did in March, what we did in April, what we did in May, and what has to be added, what has to be prepared, what will be the new challenges, how do we keep our people motivated if this happens again, how do we keep the business running if this happens again. So we, with all the tips and tricks that we have prepared, we always have these 2 main scenarios in mind, and so should you.
Okay. So yeah, like as Zuza said, like we're at the stage where a lot of restrictions are being lifted here in the Czech Republic, which actually allows businesses to change a bit how they were working during the crisis. In some cases, this is the situation where someone was in this kind of freeze. They weren't able to run their business. So for them, this is like a really a wake-up moment that they should restart, reopen somehow their business. What I can observe here on a daily basis actually is that in a lot of cases, it happens that, for instance, we get an information that something will be lifted in a week, and there are companies that are not able to reopen on the first day when the restriction is lifted. And it happens even to libraries, like they can reopen something on Monday, and I can see that they need additional 2 days to do that. So the sooner we prepare our plan how we want to do this, the sooner we will also find out what blocks us. The easier it will be for us to really start on the very first day when it's possible. So it's like really, really good to have the scenario already. And for a lot of companies, it also means that there are some changes, for instance, around them, like in their suppliers. Maybe it doesn't touch them directly, but maybe some restrictions for their suppliers are lifted and so on. So what is important in that phase is that this shift from, like some kind of freeze or being out of track happens smoothly and quickly, and a lot will depend on the communication with the employees. And it's also important to be close to those who make decisions, so to the management at that stage. It's very important to be in partnership with HR, because you might need to, for instance, get some employees back to your business. And it's very important to inform your clients on what is happening. And here the role of journalists is, of course, to be sure that your employees know what to say to the clients. So all client-facing teams or anyone who can actually spread the information should be informed in the right way. They should know what they can say, what is sure, what is just an assumption, and so that, like, when they, for instance, reopen their business, clients know about it, because that's another thing. Like, you can reopen, but if everyone thinks that you're not there, then it looks like you're not there. What happens in companies that for which the most important change was actually moving to remote working, they start rethinking coming back to the office. And that's also quite important to rethink it well, because here a very important part of it, and that actually is also valid for the companies that have, like services like, hairdressers, for instance. They also have people coming back to the office in some way. Is that here a huge role will be on the side of emotions, of fears, some kind of objections, maybe. Maybe some people will be super enthusiastic about it, like, yeah, we're coming back, I don't need to sit at home. But we need to be sure that we understand what our people think, that we ask them in advance, that we're open to the fact that they can have different emotions, and that we are flexible as well. Because one side is the real physical safety and how what we can do to make sure that they are really safe, but the other thing is this mental safety. And here we should know exactly what, for instance, facilities is preparing, what kind of measures will be introduced in our offices, in our working environments. But it's also very important to have the possibility not just to inform, but to listen to the people. And for all of that, it's also very important to include line managers, so because they are also close to the people, so that they can really gather the information. But maybe it makes sense to open some kind of info line, helpline, where people can even come with their fears anonymously, so that they can really share what's on their side. And here we also need to take into account those both scenarios. Like, if everything calms down, then like, which of those measures that we introduced will stay like forever, and how do we communicate that to the people that, okay, there are things that we want to continue to have, and when and how we remove the restrictions. And also to be clear about this, when we take into account this other scenario that there might be the second wave, then we also need to be really open to what is happening on the both physical and emotional side. How should people react when they find out that there are new cases? How they should, like, who and how should report it, like what the employer is also allowed to, from the legal point of view. The employees also need to know that. Is the employer allowed to check temperature of the employees, or is the employer allowed to somehow like restrict some reactions, send someone back home, like do some kind of test? And so like people need to know that to feel safe. And also another, I guess, important point in all of that is like the risk of social stigma. Because there might be people who were sick and they come back to the office, same with the others. And well, here again, is the employer allowed to ask like the people if they were sick or not? What if people like in your company know that someone was sick and they like start to kind of like behave in some kind of wrong way towards that person? Really, it's very important, together with HR, with line managers, like with to create this kind of culture that we are really attentive to the reactions, that we observe them, we respond to them, and that we respect how people feel. And if there would be, of course, some kind of a situation that the second wave is coming back, then it makes sense to be flexible again, to allow people to work remotely. And maybe for some people, it makes sense to continue working remotely. So all those questions are there in the air, but let's not neglect this emotional side. I think it's extremely strong right now, and it will be for some time. Then during that time when companies reset and kind of like rethink how to come back to some kind of, let's say, more typical way of working that was there for them before the crisis, we can't forget that the main goal of the company is just to deliver, right? So you should have some kind of operations more or less normal, probably adjusted already due to the crisis. But the idea is that the company should be profitable somehow, like it should deliver, it should produce, it should offer services and so on. So it's important to remember that we also, as internal comms, we have that role. So we don't just support the comeback, but we also support the communication of standard delivery, let's call it like that. And our role here is not to forget about it. We're not just like in the crisis, in the coming back. We're also in the production, and we offer our services. But we also have to like one thing is to find the balance. The other thing is to avoid clashes. So we need to be attentive to this. If there's some kind of key information coming, maybe it makes sense from time to time to kind of like move some other business communication in different places so that there are no clashes and you have like enough space for this key information. Or maybe like if you want to like kind of show people more that we're in a more normal situation, maybe it makes sense to show them that the standard communication and standard contact is there as well. Like it's again about understanding emotions in your organization and what people are ready for. And again, they need to know what they should be telling their clients and their partners, how to work with them. Another thing that will be coming, so let's imagine that we've kind of like reset our business, we're back and up and we deliver. Another thing is to have a look into the future. So like really move from the thinking, thinking in the crisis mode towards thinking in the, like there's some future. Let's have a look into the future. Let's start looking in that direction. So of course, we need to have an idea what to do with crisis symptoms. And there were a lot of things that we probably already did as an organization. Like it might touch on financial discipline, on some kind of structure changes, like whatever was there needed. And it makes sense to ensure that people understand why we did some steps and what happens with them next. So do we plan to move back some things that happened? Like if we restricted traveling and moved to working remotely, is this our new approach and we want to continue doing this? Or maybe we plan to come back because we see a value in this. That part with explaining what already happened shouldn't be that difficult, because, well, I kind of imagine that decision makers made those decisions based on something, and they know why they made them. So like being clear and transparent about this is one thing. Predicting the future is more difficult, but it's good, to start thinking of it. It's important to manage expectations of the people, to make it more clear to them that we will never come back to exactly the same situation as it was like before the corona, so that they know, okay, there will be some things changing in how we will be operating. There will be some changes in our approach to finance. There will be changes in the organizational structure. So we change, for instance, something for the crisis, but then we probably will change again to adjust to the new situation. And like people really will need to understand also where we're heading, and that's a very big part of everything. It would be great if top management started really rethinking the future from the point of view of the strategy. Sometimes maybe even, like vision, mission, like really depending on what the business was working on and how much it's affected by the situation. So if you're not able to get like the revised strategy, at least it makes sense to start talking to the management and convince them that it makes sense to do this, that they should start thinking about it, not only in their heads, like for themselves, but also, like in a more systematic approach to inform people later on. People need to know, like, what are the goals now? Are they the same as they were before the crisis? Are they like they were during the crisis? Or is there something new? Like what kind of targets do we have? What do we want to achieve as a business? And as I said, in some cases, differences might be huge between what was before, during, and what will be after. Make sure that the management is thinking of it. Make sure that you're close to those who discuss it, and whatever is there, like, communicate it, like even the intention that there is a plan to review everything, because that gives people some kind of direction and that manages their expectations. And the people. This is like a very important, like I would say, like the most important sometimes part of like how we should be working with the communication inside the company, because it's all about engaging people and making sure that they are there, like to keep the business running. So that part. Well, you won't be able to do a lot if you don't know where your people are, what they think, what they feel. So really, it makes sense to measure it. And there will be, and also Zuzka will be talking about later on about, like measuring, checking where you are and what to do with it. So it makes sense to kind of like gather all your needs to check where we are and rethink how to do this. But it really, really makes sense to check what people think, how they feel, what's their level of trust towards the management, towards co-workers, like other teams, their own teams, like in all possible directions. Because the situation might be very different. There might be companies where the trust is extremely low after the crisis because of some mistakes that were done on the way. And there might be companies where that trust and kind of engagement and some kind of level, like feeling of loyalty, is very strong right now. So depending on your situation, you either need to rebuild, or you can just build on it and strengthen what you already have, but you need to know where you are. And also it's important to discuss what your findings with the management and make sure that everyone understands where you are. And if you're able to kind of, like work with it and improve, then also you can have impact on the overall feeling later on, but you need to really work with it. And that's a good time also to recognize people for how they were helping the company to go through the crisis, and like engage in sharing as much good news and stories as possible, and connect to the values that you have. Make sure, like, also on the way, like, because that time probably showed if the values that you had on paper are actually those that you have in the reality. If that's true, if you have the same, then it really makes sense to continue on that note and to highlight the values that you have. But if you see that there is like a huge kind of gap between what you had on paper and how people actually feel, then that might be a basis for reviewing the culture. But actually, whatever you have there, like, if we are able to go through the crisis together, that's a great opportunity to build a stronger culture based on that one. So make sure that you really are able to engage and motivate your people at that stage. And what will help as well, because like if you want your business to be up and running and you want to engage people, well, they also need to know not only where the business is heading from the point of view of like what's the key area that it's working on, what kind of service or product it will be offering, but also how it's organized inside, how will it be working, what's expected from the people as employees, what ways of working, what procedures, tooling, like everything that is inside, like it might have impact on the locations. The company might decide to move much more to working remotely than it was working before. So there might be this kind of situations that you take into account as a business, like, for instance, internal comms could partner with HR and L&D for this, to, for instance, move onboarding more to online, and offboarding as well. And the company might decide, okay, that if we're able to work remotely, maybe it makes sense to look for new talents in different countries, for instance, more globally, and so on. And that might have a long-term impact on how the company is operating. So also do your best to be close to that and to translate that, like, to the employees, so that they know what's going on, where we're heading, what's expected from them, what's really changing, and how they should adjust. It takes a lot of time for the people to adjust to this kind of changes. And like even yesterday, like I remember she wrote us in our kind of like group of internal comms people, that she still sees those that are, even in the crisis, are not able to switch from email to a more, like online platform, the one that really allows for collaboration. And it really, really takes a lot of time for some people to change their habits. So it makes sense to start thinking of it now. And now Zuzka will tell you a bit more about really opportunities that this situation gives to internal comms.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I have the better part in the sense of opportunities, as Diana kind of summarized what happened and what needs to be done from the bigger perspective of the whole company and employee engagement and employee trust. I will focus more on internal comms as such. According to Institute of PR, 10% of comms specialists or professionals didn't have a crisis communication plan during this time, and 15% of them had some, but didn't help them. So 25% of people working in comms were either missing crisis comms plan at all, or they had some but it didn't apply to the situation. So I think it's time here now to say that it's necessary to have some plan ready for the future. And what a better way to start with putting down new plan or revising the one that you have than to sit down and look back on what happened and ask yourself and ask your employees whether the tools that you used during the crisis worked, or they, for some reason, they didn't. What was missing in the tools, in the channels, what was missing in the content of the comms, what tools may be great for situation when everything's running smoothly, and what tools need to be there, maybe not implemented for the business as usual, but you have to have them somewhere and prepared and ready for when something like this happens again. So right now, I think the best thing to do is sit down, write it down while it's still fresh and everyone remembers what they liked, what bothered them. Then go to your management, go to HR and share the findings. And based on that, based on the discussions, revise and rebuild your comms plan and your crisis comms plan. And again, work like plan or hope for the best, but be prepared for the worst. So have in mind that there are multiple scenarios that can happen and you should be ready for all of them. And also in the comms plan as such, create a space for where you can think about how to rebuild the trust and improve the image of the company, since many of the companies or organizations are going through a stage of layoffs, or they were hit by the infection heavily. They had many people being sick or something. So maybe it applies to your company, maybe not, but it's always good to think how to rebuild the trust and how to rebuild the culture again, as also Diana was mentioning, and to compare it to the values that you have on paper but may not apply to the reality. Okay, so let's see if I move to another slide or not. Yeah, okay, great. So as for the online tooling, it's important to say that digital is here to stay. So it's nothing that would arise with the crisis and now it would disappear. It just speeded up the whole process that was coming to IC anyways. So just yesterday, Twitter announced to all of their 5,000 plus employees that they don't have to come back to their offices, and they allow the whole company to work remotely and continue with this setup forever. And Google, Microsoft, Facebook, they have it at least for this year. So all of their employees, at least this year, can still work remotely and don't have to come back. So as you can see, even from the worldwide trend, you will have to reconsider online, even if you had all the tools and channels now offline, or online wasn't a priority for the management. And 46% according to some recent study, 46% of companies said that they didn't have the right tools and channels during the crisis. That's almost half of the companies didn't have the right tools and channels to deal with the crisis the way they wanted. So again, as for the comms plan, here it's the same. I would recommend, or we would recommend, to start with sitting down and revising, looking at what you have, how it worked during crisis, and whether it makes sense to keep the tool, whether it makes sense to enhance it, or it didn't work, it didn't fulfill the expectations, and it's time to switch it. So look at what you have and what you will work with during the smooth and great times, and also during the maybe upcoming crisis. Hopefully not, fingers crossed, but you never know. Also, you should revise the rules and processes, because for so many companies what happened was that they had to switch to remote very quickly, and they found out they were missing some tools, so they just bought or implemented whatever. It happened with, for instance, Zoom in many companies, but they don't have any process, they don't have any rules in place. So now coming back to the office, it's time to again, revise what you have, and also create the processes and implement the tools into your comms plan, find them the place, and create the rules for the people so that they know what they have to work with. One more thing that is or I recommend to also revise is the hardware and software of your people, since as the companies had to move to remote working, not everyone was ready, and many of the companies struggle with employees having just like small laptops, or having to work from tablets, or having a very slow internet connection. So if you expect your people to move digital or online with you, and you also allow them working from home, then you have to adjust. And maybe think about, instead of offering home office as the benefit, then offer some money or something for better internet connection, so the people can upgrade their plans and have a better quality of Zoom calls or other meetings. So also revise what's working for the people and what they have, if you expect them to go digital, so their experience is pleasant and they are not annoyed by you switching to digital and them not having all the tools they need. Diversify, meaning that you shouldn't count on having just one channel or one tool for delivering the messages. So think about the messages, think about the content, and think how you can diversify and where you can catch your employees to make sure that everyone gets the message. So don't rely just on email, don't rely just on internet, but think about ways, the most effective and efficient ways how to deliver the messages across using different channels, different tools. Teach the people how to use the tools. Maybe they're completely new to them, they adjust it somehow, but they struggle. And now going out of the crisis, it's the time to look back and see whether we are using the tools as efficiently as we could. And maybe if the people, if your employees would have known that, maybe the whole crisis could have gone more smoothly in your company. So don't underestimate the power of teaching, and don't just put some info on intranet or somewhere and expect the people to learn how to work with Zoom, how to work with Slack, how to work with all the tools, on top of all the things that they have going on in their lives now. Engage, as I was saying at the beginning, during the crisis, usually communication switches to one-way communication, because you need to inform the people. You need to inform them quickly what they should do, how they should behave. now it's the time to start thinking how to engage them again and how to use the online tools without losing this personal touch and without losing this involvement. So look at your online tools also from that point of view, how you can use them or how you can bend them to allow the people to interact and measure. Because as the finances are tight in many companies now, it will come handy to have some kinds of reports to show what works and what not, and why the tools and why the things that you are doing are worth it. Okay, as the time is running, I'm speeding my speech. So offline channels, all of that I said applies to offline channels too. So I will not repeat it, as you will get the presentation. So again, revise, diversify, look at the tools and how they fit into your plan. But a couple of questions that you may want to ask yourself while considering offline channels and offline tools. Look at what tools and channels that you have been using make sense in the new normal. As we talked about the whole environmental change and value change, maybe your company structure changed, maybe your business priorities changed. So do these channels and do these tools make sense in the new normal? Don't just pick up where you left and print the magazine for the sake of the magazine, but really ask yourself if it makes sense in this new setup. Ask yourself whether the benefits exceed the risks. So if we really want to have this face-to-face meeting, if we really want to have this event, does it make sense? Do the benefits of it exceed the risks? What if the people are still scared and won't show up? What if we do a great event to cheer up the whole team, but they are scared to see each other face to face and they will just not show up? So think about the possible risks and also the feelings of the people as well. And don't forget to ask yourself whether the benefits also exceed the costs. So do we really want to keep some of the events, conferences, offsites, and other things that we have been doing and we love? Does it make sense in this whole new world? And also ask yourself whether the offline tools or channels are where the people are. If your people keep working remotely, if they don't want to spend much time in the kitchens or in bathrooms or elevators, does it really make sense to print those posters and put them there if the people are not there, or they are not there for long enough to actually read what you have to say? So also, again, as sometimes we want to just do and we want to deliver and we want to do these campaigns and have these nice things, ask yourself whether actually it makes sense to have posters or have the magazine in a setup where half of the people are still not in the offices or they are behaving differently in your environment. So that's for the offline. And last thing, as far as the tools and channels go, we also included influencers and ambassadors, because one of the internal comms experts, Mike Klein, says that only 3% of people in your company deliver 90% of the content or of information. And you need to know who these 3% are, because usually it's not just your line management, it's not just you. but it's these people that other people follow, other people trust for some reason, and they influence their perceiving, they influence how they react to the information. So what we advise is to find these people, find these influencers, and ideally turn them into your ambassadors so that they work for you, not or with you, not against you. And how you turn them into ambassadors is that you invite them to this inner circle where you are able to provide them with more information. You are able to provide them with the information in advance. So they keep their status of these influencers because they have information that other people in the company still don't have, but they are able to kind of spread the word and prepare the rest of the organization that something is coming. And usually people get the information and adjust to it better if it comes from someone they trust and if it's personal, not just an email from somewhere from the top, from people they have never seen. So include them in your comms plan and include them in your activities.
Okay, so super quick recap. Yeah, so we see this process of moving to the post-corona, to the new normal, as a combination of a couple of phases. So one of them is like everything that will happen in businesses and where internal comms supports that, to have the business again up and then running. You know, one thing is to kind of like reopen, reset, especially if there was some kind of, you know, like super slowdown and so on. And another thing is how to move out of the surviving mode to like really looking into the future and adjusting for the future. And it really helps if internal comms is there, is active, and works with the employees so the business can go through those phases. And that's also it's also very important to use the moment as much as you can to improve how internal communication is done in the company in general, so that you're ready for the future, for everything that the situation might bring. And I think what's very important actually, that we're in the time where also mistakes are forgiven to some extent. So whatever you try, whatever you do, first of all, you will be able to learn a lot. Another thing is that we are here now in the situation where during the crisis, we tried out some things like a bit randomly, but we can continue using that opportunity to try out new things. And everyone kind of like understands that if we introduce some things quickly, you know, like to really help the current situation, that it doesn't have to be ideal. So if there's anything that you thought of, you know, like before that you want to do it, like, I don't know, podcasts, like some kind of videos, or, you know, like try out something new. Well, we believe that now is a quite good time to do that, because people won't be that picky that it's not ideal. So like really from that perspective, it makes sense to use the moment. Also remember that, well, there's no such thing as ideal world and ideal conditions for internal comms. So whatever we described here, well, it doesn't mean that you have to do everything, or, you know, like don't get discouraged if you find out that you have blockers, that there are some things where it's absolutely impossible to start the discussion in your company. And just try kind of like different things, try to some extent maybe, as I said, like when there was like about revising the strategy for 2020 and beyond. Well, if you don't have the revised strategy, like what you can do is at least start a discussion about it, and that's already something. So don't get discouraged, use the opportunities that are there, try out new things, and, you know, like whatever you do, you will for sure learn. So just try out and enjoy, you know, like whatever you can get out of that situation. And that's actually it that we prepared for you guys. So would be happy to find out if you have any questions. I know like we've run out of time, but we are both open to stay longer. So feel free to ask. You can write your questions in the chat, or you can just unmute and tell us, like if you have any questions.
Okay. Seems like everything's clear. It seems like we exhausted everyone.
Maybe I have one question. Sorry, I was muted first. What do you think the new normal is going to be for you? If you have any guess right now.
I can maybe say for myself, like, we both work like as external consultants, like from that perspective. So we are not touched, by those changes as an employee of some organization. So I guess this is like valid for both of us. But I would say that for me, for instance, like what changes is actually that I need to take when I kind of like discuss with some kind of clients. Like, first of all, it's much easier to start cooperating remotely, and you don't have to just, like show up at their office, like just to kind of like say, hello, this is me, and do you want to work with me? It's much easier to kind of continue the discussion remotely. So I think that for professionals like us, it actually opens the door to international cooperation much more than it was before as well, because it doesn't matter where you are that much, especially for the parts of the work where you really don't have to be in the office to see how people, for instance, behave, right? Like if the company would be working remotely in most, like in its main part, then we can support remotely as well. So I would say that's a huge change. And another thing is that we also need to take into account like all the changes, that maybe different tooling is needed, maybe different ideas, that people might have different objections, fears, thoughts, and so on. So everything that we told you here is actually valid for us as professionals as well. Not sure, Zuzka, if you see it differently.
No, yeah, I agree. And yeah, for me, the new normal is also attached to the companies that I work with. So since they're in different industries, the new normal looks differently based on where I stand with whom I work. So yeah, it's easier now to introduce some of the tools, and it's easier to introduce them even in companies that, for instance, before Corona didn't even offer home offices. So I have a client who didn't even have the option for people to work on home office, and now they had to pretty much switch to remote work. So that's a whole new challenge to revise the comms plan, and everything I was talking about is pretty much I'm going through that now with some of the companies. So yeah, so the switch to digital, and also kind of looking at their current situation and maybe kind of tuning it down, because some of them went crazy on the tools and on all of the things they introduced. Like, we will do 10 meetings per day to see how people are doing, to control their task. Then Friday beer online. Then we do a polls. Then we do a quiz. And so now it's kind of the time for me as the external consultant to tune it down a bit and ask the companies and ask the internal comms people in the companies, okay, does this still make sense? Does it need to stay, or it served during the crisis, but it maybe even the people are tired of it now. Maybe they don't want to have Zoom beers every Friday anymore. So yeah, so it's also this critical point of view, like I'm the controller looking at all of the things that happened and try to put it back in place and into some cohesive plan or strategy.
And one thing that I might actually add is that companies might also start looking a bit differently on how they communicate with field employees. So if they have, like people dispersed somewhere there, to have like better tools to be in touch with them, because like they kind of like saw how much more important that is, what kind of risks might actually be there, and that like it may be really makes sense to invest more in some kind of tools that are available on mobile and that work well on mobile, not just that they have some kind of possibility, like you can kind of try to see the whole website from your super small screen on the phone, but that actually they have appropriate tools for this.
Thank you for sharing.
And how does it look for you? Just if I may ask, how does it look? How does the new normal look for Vysoft?
I think I would kind of wait on this answer, because the future will show. But even like from this hour, I made like few points to kind of reevaluate and kind of think of in the future. So, but yeah, it's hard to answer that now. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe I would add to all of that the new normal for us seems internal comms or the whole IC role now is way more clear and way more important than it was in many of the companies before. So what we see is that now we don't have to explain in so many companies or to that many people why it makes sense to have some kind of comms plan or someone who is dedicated to it, that in times of crisis or if something happens, it's great to have at least some kind of plan if you don't have the person dedicated, or at least to be decided on who will take over and who will lead the company through the crisis from the point of view like of the internal comms. So that's a huge change, I would say. We haven't seen that many webinars and materials on internal comms, I think, during our whole life, as we have seen during the past 2 months.
Okay, just super quickly, because like most people like had to go. We will of course share the recording, we'll share the presentation, and we haven't planned to also send you some kind of like a support material, like a checklist where you can go like through those phases that we described and kind of like work with it to decide what you want to actually try out, what you want to do out of it, like what is realistic in your company, what you want to try out, how you're progressing this with this, and what was the outcome, so that you can have something that will help you to kind of like rethink, review, and then work with it.
Yep. And don't forget to join us on Facebook and LinkedIn, as we will be sharing this and much more there. And we also hope to bring the discussion and the possible questions or your experience and everything to the Facebook group to start the conversation and the community. And so if you have anything that you would like to share, like best practices, or you have a question, feel free to join and ask and discuss. We will be very happy. Okay, so I guess that's all from us. So if you don't have any more questions, then thank you.
We wish you like a great afternoon.
Yeah. Be safe. Thank you for joining us, and bye.
Okay. And see you next time.
Yeah, bye to everyone, and thank you once more.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.